Can you take us through all that transpired, or some of the things that transpired that led you into saying that the INEC chairman, all he said, does not inspire hope and confidence?
It happened a couple of weeks ago, but I just instituted it yesterday. And I was sent, I think David Mark was supposed to be part of the panelists with some of the chairman of APC and Labour Party and a couple of other chairmen. But for some reason, he has a personal respect for me and liking. He asked that I should stand in for him, not as a member or a leader of ADC, but personal, respect that I should go. So I got there. Now, when I got there and I listened to the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, what I didn't see, okay, let me say what I saw. What I saw was like somebody who didn't quite understand the landscape before he came. Now, this is an INEC that overpromised, that had very high civic society support, INEC that had built up reputation and had some innovations leading to 2023 elections. So, and the civil society fought for electoral reform, and they got what they wanted. They got a clear language on electronic transmission of election. They got a clear language that they themselves will decide the mode. And INEC went ahead and decided the mode, which is direct transmission from polling units to the IREF, which is the INEC result viewing portal, and of course the INEC electronics storage, if you like, collection center. And this INEC inexplicably failed to do that and went to court to say, well, what we promised that we're going to do and backed by a regulation, we are free to walk away from it. And the court somehow said, blah, 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 yes. Now, from being a new chairman in that context, their first challenge is to inspire back confidence, to give a clear declaration of integrity. Because what failed in INEC in 2023 was not technology. It wasn't logistic. It was integrity to the finishing line. The INEC chairman then, Professor Mahmood, could have been a hero, but that means perhaps APC would have been defeated. The legislative election was transmitted. The presidential election could not, because they gave their people bad passwords that didn't fit in. And after a delay about 4-6 hours, we saw results coming from, notably River State, badly mutilated. So those results cannot validly sustain a declaration of election, even in the worst banana country. I mean, Russia does a better job with electoral integrity than what we had. North Korea clearly does a better job. So an INEC chairman coming in this context would speak to the country reassuringly. But one of the things he heard, so what I didn't hear was that tone of, we know the problem. The problem is integrity failure. We've come with the solution. We are going to be boldly, courageously honest. He didn't say that. What I heard also was some kind of dissimulation, kind of talking about, there are many tests of, we can't get 100%. I mean, when people start by telling you, nothing is perfect, they're just being criminal or stupid. We talk about perfection. There is a clear benchmark for credible election. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. So when I just say nothing is perfect, that's not the point. We know nothing is perfect. Even our concept of perfection is imperfect. What we are saying, there are basic things that have to be done, not rocket science. India does election, Ghana does election. So you start by saying it's not going to be perfect, but there are indicators. What are indicators? You talk about logistics. That's not the. If you look at Nigerian electoral conflicts going to court, notice about logistics. Oh, ballot box didn't come by 9, it came 12. People don't mind. They vote. What always matters is after voting, the integrity of the count and integrity of the results. And those are fixable. And this guy didn't, upon all the briefing he got, he came there and spoke in a very, in my view, timid, not reassuring. I didn't see courage. I didn't see understanding of the crisis. I didn't see the commitment to fight back against what has become an industry and a cabal of electoral malpractice. So if I was going to put hot money, bet on the outcome from what I heard from him, I concluded in my mind that this guy, except the parties themselves, Nigerian citizens themselves, fight this fight. I don't see Joash Amopita with whatever credibility he may have as a scholar, as a human being. I'm not saying it's corrupt, but I'm saying I didn't see a man who would hold the line against this invading army of election riggers who want to be in power. And in a third world country like Nigeria, across Africa, you can see the same pattern. Desperation for power, very desperate calculation for power, a very weak and oftentimes beaten and poor civil society. So the electoral umpire becomes just a scaffold for them to rig election.
Was it also why you said that this election was going to be worse than what we've had, and that this INEC, we can't trust this election is going to conduct?
Yes. Okay, now look at it. By this time last election, we had clarity who are the political parties. Today, we don't have clarity which of the parties going to stand. Apart from APC, you don't even know whether ADC will be registered, rumors and some signals we are seeing. You can wake up and say, oh, wow, ADC shouldn't have been registered. Right? You don't know. By this time, last electoral cycle, it was clear how the primaries will happen. Today, it's not clear to you. They talk about direct primary and consensus, but we saw the convention. Which mode was used? Was it direct primary or consensus? You can't know. One, nobody said, these are the list of candidates for those elective offices. This is where they signed off, because the law says you must, each of the aspirants who are cleared, will sign off a consent for consensus. Nobody said. You hear in the APC primary where those who said they didn't give us form, we bought form, were excluded. So the rules are not clear. The electoral law says direct primary. It says parties must have electronic register. Nobody has verified. Parties are still struggling. In fact, the IPAC is saying you shouldn't control us. You shouldn't directly prescribe for us how to elect them. It's against internal democracy. So at this point, there's no certainty, there's no clarity. You don't even have the time. INEC is struggling to fit everything into a very small time space, whereas INEC itself has no managerial capability to really do the things that ought to be done. And just yesterday, INEC says, you know what? All voters should line out and go and be revalidated. Isn't this speaking to you about chaos? So you come and tell us that, oh, these voters have been taken out of the voting. In fact, some people are alleging, assuming a voting strength of opposition, maybe Northern Nigeria or maybe Lagos or maybe anywhere. You go and freeze out voters. You did biometrics. The idea of biometrics is a permanent evidence of validity. Is that how you do few months to elections come in January? From February, you push to January in response to Muslims, or few Muslims actually, who claim that, Ramadan is not a time to vote, which doesn't make sense because in Muslim countries, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, and every other places, they do voting. Voting is not manual labor. Voting does not violate. But you consider, okay? So it's not January. Today is, so we have less than 9 months. Technically, this is the 3rd month. So this is the 4th month. So you have less than, worst case, less than 10 months for the polls. And you're asking voters to all go out with INEC that has very, very, inefficient operations. They're going to revalidate to be voters. What necessitates that? Why is it necessary to do this? Again, you just sent a memo to political parties. You want to come and do verification of parties again. Meanwhile, you've not even defined your rules. You just gave a draft rule for regulation you want to enact, draft. just a couple of days ago to the parties. You've not done consultation, probably will not do. So the point I was trying to make is this, that everything suggests to me that this will be the most bungled election. Just yesterday, he told us that ADC, the leading opposition party, has no leadership, neither nor. Okay? And they ought to have a convention in less than a week or so. Okay? They ought to have a primary before May 30, to have, in fact, May 20, to have their president and other aspirants. And today, they don't have any leadership. And then you have a case building in court where there's no finality, where judges are playing ping pong. So what is I looking for? Some Hercules will come and uplift all this. There are many balls in the air that 2, 3, 4, there are about 20, 30 balls on the air dangling. So you should expect that at least 5 of those 20 balls will come to the ground.
Do you see the hand of the ruling APC in all of this, trying to either pressurize INEC, or INEC is just acting a script on their own?
The reasonable thing to say is, for example, PDP, a leading opposition party. So why are they in turmoil? Anyhow, you cut it. The principal officer of this government says that our party must not produce a candidate to challenge a ruling party. I mean, this is never heard of. So what logic suggests that the president's main guy, because the FCT minister is, by definition, the landlord, even of Mr. President. So president, the guy who oversees the president's territory, is, no matter how you look at it, a very important cabinet member. And he tells his party leaders that, anyhow you got it, we will not have a candidate to challenge my principal. So PDP, after that statement, PDP went into a terminal crisis. Today, PDP that is alive is the one that the minister controls and that says our job is no vacancy till 2031. Labour Party we saw everything was going on, and suddenly we saw a kind of friendship between Abure, the guy who is claiming ownership or leadership, and the same minister. We saw fancy pictures, smiling faces. Then court says, throw this guy out. It took months for INEC to respond. INEC refused at a point when they grudgingly removed his name, they put his signature. But a few days ago, last week, they said there's a court order, INEC immediately enforced it. And today, the leading opposition, you are telling them that there's no leadership. So, yes, it might look to say INEC is failing, but essentially, look, the tragedy of democratic elections in Africa and Nigeria primarily now is that the electoral commission is supported by a president who has all incentives to be in power. And few presidents don't push that envelope too far. We saw Jonathan, perhaps his members regretting that appointed somebody who showed some kind of courage against him, maybe because the agenda aligned then, not one's power. That chairman's from the north. People say, oh, it was actually not really integrity. This is like, a guy who is not going to accept this guy. But the president appoints the commission. There's a story put out by a leading professor of law in this country who says that this guy signed his letter of resignation. So, if you understand African politics, an electoral umpire appointed by a president will most likely not be independent. And when that electoral umpire is dealing with a government that has shown capacity and recklessness in capturing state institutions, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the independent regulator for election. So what we're seeing today is that many independent analysts and who are courageous will tell you that the state capture index is high in Nigeria. The ruling party has, in my view, penetrated these institutions, and the INEC now has a responsibility to show by its conduct that it's not doing these things to favor the ruling party. For the first time in our history, we've seen competitive elections. We've seen opposition parties survive, fail election maybe, but survive. Buhari, just 8 years of President Buhari, APC, we didn't see the opposition party go into engineered crisis of leadership that we're seeing, the kind we're seeing now. And I've given you two instances where the minister played role, PDP. It is also in the political system where the minister of FCT tells the governor of Bauchi, I'll put fire under you. And then, like they say, all cry in the night and the child died in the morning. And then, so basically, you would say that, look, whoever is responsible, they are engineering this electoral system to end, like I said, chaotic, terrible, and utterly rigged. I've seen nothing so far in the way the judiciary and INEC is going about their business that suggests to me that the scenario that will emerge Monday morning after the election is a scenario of credibility, trustworthiness, and calm after. No. I see chaos, I see violent disputation, I see a terrible election that might lead to, if not the collapse of democracy in Nigeria, but definitely a major dent on democracy and accountability.
How do you think we can retrace our steps? Because right now, what we've seen is that INEC has frozen out ADC as it is currently. And then also barred the leadership, deleted them from their portal, barred them from attending congresses. Is INEC doing their job, or are they being weaponized to just cut off the head of the opposition? And how can we retrace these steps?
My sense is that INEC has been thoroughly corrupt even before now. I mean, that's no doubt about it. INEC is a very corrupt institution. That's, if you look at every index of integrity, INEC scores very low. We've seen it in many ways. You look at even some of the cases. I mean, why would INEC corrupt the election, not the delivered transmission, and then go to court and say, well, court, our defense is, we don't even bother. It's our choice not to. I mean, that's it's an organization that lacks credibility. What a credible organization would do is to come and say, this is why we failed. And then the court will take an opinion. But you go there and says, we failed. We're not even supposed to protect our votes. We're not even supposed to trigger our most reliable mechanism for credibility of elections. So INEC is a very corrupt institution. Therefore, I think that the ruling party would easily, and probably is easily, using a corrupt organization. And I've said again, Joash Amopita does not strike me. He has no pedigree of somebody who fights the system. What INEC needs now is somebody, another electoral system needs somebody who's independent-minded, whose appointment is independently procured, and who can stand against a clear political will to undermine democracy. And again, back to the solution, stepping back from the precipice is first and foremost a national acknowledgement that democracy is at risk in Nigeria. This is beyond partisanship. This is not about APC. I mean, I could care less if the ruling party wins election, even though I think a ruling party that has not performed. Democracy is built on competitiveness, as Professor Skumpita said it many years ago. He said democracy is the prospect that voters will vote you out and you go home. So if you don't perform, you go home. That's what it is about. So I would like always that after a government is there 8 years, if their scorecard does not show up, so someone else should replace them, because that creates incentive for people to do well. But beyond that, I couldn't care more who wins the election than I care that elections are themselves competitive. So if you look at West Africa, the tragedy of democracy decline, as people say, some argue that it's not democracy that has failed, it's actually politics that's failing in West Africa. It's actually, liberal democracy. Whatever we argue, the point is that the people come to trust the votes less, the politicians come to capture institutions that determine election, and then they create fait accompli that leads to underperformance in governance, and ultimately, violent overthrow of government. So when Nigeria, look, we are dealing in a shadow of a reported coup. Is that not correct? So we had a story where they said there was a plan for a violent coup. Some guys are behind bars today because they are led to have. So if they can think about a coup in this condition, think about what will come when we defeat democracy as a working. So my fear, honestly, is that I see that Nigeria's democracy is failing fundamentally. And where democracy fails is when there are no more competition. Democracy does not promise that the best guys get elected, the good guys get elected. The minimum of democracy is that at any time the people feels like they can change government. And when that change is no longer possible, because those in power have bought over, captured, right word, the institutions that determine that process of voter selection of a different actors. When it's foreclosed, then they have also foreclosed the prospect of basic freedom and human rights, because essentially the basic rights include the rights to make the choice to vote or not to vote, to express choice between alternatives. So what we are walking into is where there's actually no alternative. And that's where INEC's role and the court's role are in focus. If INEC's shenanigans and all this, their cockot and pest, decision making, results in destroying ADC, destroying Labour Party, destroying PDP, and on Monday morning or Sunday evening, we are left with only President Tinubu and the APC as the only viable party. Today, they have taken over the National Assembly, largely. That's about 30 governors many governors have. And what is driving this defection? It's not anything. There's no magic. APC doesn't have a magic formula in managing their parties are better managed. All the parties are shambolic. But what is driving it is the politicians think there's no way out, that there or not you die. If we stay out, they rig us out. The courts are foreclosed. Go to court. The courts have since 2023, since before then, court has now a history of distrust. If you look at the Afrobarometer, the courts at INEC have about 75% to 80% distrust. That means 75 to 80% citizens say, we don't trust the judiciary. If you do that today, a new poll, you will discover that about 90% of Nigerians or more have no confidence in the judiciary, especially in election cases, with very clear evidence of corruption, report anecdotes of participants on how they bribe judges and all that. And of course, you don't have to go far. A Nigerian senator, a senior senator, openly said he arranged electoral victories elections for his colleagues through his wife. This is an open admission. So nobody can accuse you of scandalizing the judiciary if the actor says, I did it with my wife, who is the president of the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal has been a center of corruption in election cases. That presidency, whoever occupied that office, needs to have a moral profiling and look at their history, because they're the ones who comprise these cases. So we are getting to a point where the system is being rigged to create a sense of fait accompli. And when that happens, Nigeria is a very poor, volatile society. So imagine what sections of the country not in power would think about. So just imagine some people in the north say, oh, we are feeling cheated. And maybe they are fancying that at the poll, at the election, they could win. Some people in the southeast might say, oh, it's our turn. And they are fancying that maybe if we project our candidate, a candidate who is popular, and they work together, they win. Now, if those are foreclosed because elections are already rigged before you even start the process, what would they do? They would resort to violence. Violence is the only attractive process we are facing now. And that's why some of us are worried, not because of partisanship. We are worried that we are about losing our democracy because we are allowing politicians use their desperation for power, use the power calculus to overshadow other calculus. We need to think about development calculus. We need to think about stability, how this country can be stable and rescued. And all this will require in the minimum that if you're going to follow democracy trajectory, if you're going to be a democracy, The minimum you require is a competitive election. And this is why some people say maybe dictatorships outperform democracies. Oh, China, the secret is very simple. If you're not a true democracy, you can't attain development. If you are a well-managed dictatorship, you can attain development. So if you put in a formula, you can say bad democracy is less than dictatorship. Good democracy better than dictatorship. So if you look at the world, the map of development in the world, the countries have made it with the Scandinavians, much of Europe, where the fundamentals of democracy are in practice, they get development. If you look at the other map, those who have made it, who may not be that democratic, maybe China, maybe South Korea under Lee Kuan Yew, under General Park. Now South Korea is a good democracy. Maybe Japan under the generals in 1925, when they started their miracle. Singapore, maybe under Lee Kuan Yew. What is common? That these were well-run developmental states that had rule of law, but probably didn't have votes, and there was no pretension. If you look at countries that are at the bottom of development ladder, there are countries that put a formality of democracy, but are neither democracies nor organized authoritarian governments. They are the worst in development index. So that is why today Nigeria is classified as electoral autocracy. So you're not even a democracy. And so my argument is that beyond the fact that the elections will be rigged in 2027, or seem to be being rigged, there's also a chaos element, mismanaged, ungoverned. INEC has not shown the rules, the electoral act, the time frame, everything points to massive failure. So together with the fact that the votes will be rigged, the fake results will be announced because the legislators work very hard to ensure that there's no real time. Everything they did will make sure they create that possibility that somebody can cook the results and get it through the judicial process and say, oh, well, the law says it doesn't have to be. I mean, this is just what they set up. So, but that apart, we're now faced with a different that you might end up with, even don't know who are the parties to vote for, who are the candidates. One legal scholar says, by getting back to Abacha's 5 leprous finger, you don't even have a candidate apart from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
All right, different states seem to have become the laboratory of political destruction in Nigeria. The FCT minister created the governor, SYMFONI, and then we saw how all the fights and then how he tried to destroy him. The Supreme Court intervened. Then federal might was deployed. For you, is what happened in Rivers the same template that President Tinubu intends to use against any governor that tries to step out of line?
I don't know whether you use the same template, but what I'd say is that there is obvious coercion, but also some degree of cowardice. I see, governors themselves, maybe because they're not confident of themselves, maybe because they're not confident of the electoral system, I think more so because of that, and they're not confident of the courts, that they are jittery, even when there's no cause to be jittery. Some of the ways governors try to appease Tinubu, even those governors who are still standing, some of them, their body language approach is too supine and condescending, that I know the fear of INEC and the fear of the court is the beginning of wisdom in Nigerian politics.
Well, let's wrap up this way. You said Nigeria will have the worst democracy in 2027 than we have today. That's death sentence on this republic. With this seeming reality, what's your advice to Nigerians going into 2027 elections?
To first realize that the signs are not good. To also understand that apart from God, everything is created. These are predictions based on scenario. If they change the scenario, if they change the game, they get different outcomes. So if Nigerians start getting more concerned about democracy surviving in Nigeria, less about the party who wins. If Nigerians start thinking more around how do we ensure competitive, free, fair election and push on INEC, then I might be wrong. I would like to be proved false, to be a false prophet, so that in 2027 we have a better democracy. INEC conducts a less chaotic, less rigged, more transparent, more credible election. But from what I'm seeing, if we continue in this trend, the result is guaranteed.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.